Afternoon, everybody, depending on what time zone you're in. I am multitasking, so I'm buzzing everybody in as I talk to you. But welcome. We have an amazing panel discussion today on a very hot topic that everybody's buzzing about. AI in legal, managing the risks and maximizing the value. Our fabulous panelists, which I'm about to introduce to you, have their task cut out for them. First, I want to introduce our amazing moderator. You all know her and love her, Alicia Hawley, direct.
I don't know. There might be some people who don't love me.
Discovery Counsel. And then we have our fabulous panelists. Our first panelist is Sarah Thompson. She is Chief Product Officer at BlueStar Case Solutions. And then we have the amazing Bobby Malhotra. Everybody knows and loves him as well, partner at Winston and Strawn. And then we have the ever charming Jonathan Johnson-Swagle. Jonathan Johnson-Swagle is manager, CLO operations. I do have bios up on our website. If anybody would like to learn more about our panelists, you're more than welcome to go. I will put the link in the chat room for you, but it's on our BlueStar cs.com website, and it's under events, and it's under this panel discussion. I also would love to invite everybody to please, link up with them on LinkedIn. And if you're not connected to any of these people, connect with them. They're amazing. I will go over a little bit of housekeeping. There's not much to it. This is recorded. So if anybody has missed it, you will get a recording of it. And for the attendees, you will have a recording that you can reference back to. You are able to ask questions in our chat room that Alicia will be monitoring throughout the panel discussion, and we will make our best efforts to answer any of your questions. And then this panel discussion is presented by BlueStar. BlueStar has been your trusted provider for over 20 years, navigating the complexities of modern legal landscape in e-discovery, litigation, and data solutions. Well, without any further ado, I will continue to let all of these knowledge seekers in, and I will pass the torch over to you, Alicia.
Thanks, Deidre. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So glad to see people here and popping in. Before we start, I just want to give the usual disclaimer that all of the opinions shared here today are those of us as individuals and not of any of our affiliated organizations. So always got to do that at the beginning. So, one of the reasons that we wanted to do this is to really talk about how we're using AI, how to use it responsibly and ethically, and to start off by talking a little bit about what it actually is. One of the things that we've sort of noticed is that a lot of these panels don't even cover, how it works and what it is. So we wanted to start off with that and lay a little bit of the foundation before we jump into some of the more substantive and philosophical conversations and questions about it. So Sarah, I wanted to start with you. Can you sort of give us a high-level overview or summary of what the difference is between generative and non-generative AI as far as functionality?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm happy to do it. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm so excited to be here myself. Even though I'm presenting from my home, I'm happy to be here with all of you. So when we look at AI, we're talking about a lot of different terms that probably are very confusing for pretty much everybody, no matter how educated you are on the subject. So we're talking generative, non-generative, we're talking traditional, we're talking language models, we're talking NLP, ML, LLM, LLP, PLM, OMG, W2H, right, guys? Like what? So let's make it real simple here. Generative AI is the buzz these days. It's the Chat GPT. Generative, meaning generates content, new stuff, can write a story, can sing a song. Well, I don't know if it can sing, but it can write a song, can generate like images, things like that. That's all generative. That's the new and the cool new stuff that we're really seeing, rattle the entire world. Now, non-generative or traditional AI has been around for well over a decade, and you're looking at things that are, you basically tell the AI what to do. So like Google Translate, for instance, is AI. It uses machine learning. It knows how to translate into a set of languages, right? But it doesn't know how to, if you ask it what the score was on the basketball game last night, it will not know. And nor do I. So that's it. I mean, if you have any more in-depth questions, please let me know. But this is what we're talking about: generative, traditional. That's what we're going to cover today.
So what I hear you saying is that AI, generative AI, is not a search engine.
No, well, actually, it's integrated into search engines.
What the basketball score is, because it's not Google.
That's right. That's right. It will be soon, but not yet.
So Jonathan, Sarah talked about Google Translate as an example. What are some other ways, just to sort of get people thinking about how we're already using it and maybe don't even realize it? What are some ways in our daily lives that we're using the traditional AI functionality and applications?
Yeah, sure. And this list just kind of came up, last few days. I was thinking as I touch things around the house, from my electronic vacuum to virtual assistants like Siri, Alexa, Google. At night when I go to bed, for instance, I tell my Google Nest Mini to set alarms for me in the morning and to start my morning with the news cycle. Email filtering. A lot of us have, our email filter set up to exclude certain things or to highlight other things. Those are, rule-based. Recommendation systems like in Netflix. I rely on recommendations that are auto-recommended for me from a variety of platforms, from the news on my phone, which recommends recipes and a variety of things that it knows because I've typed them into the search a variety of times, to pull those back to me. In the same way, social media algorithms, my Facebook and LinkedIn and X or Twitter, as it was known, feeds are all produced in such a way that they pull what it thinks I like to see. Language translation, and you see this also in generative, but traditionally you saw language translation handled through services like Google Translate using linguistic rules. And then customer service chatbots. I'm a notorious budget traveler, so I fly Spirit. They have you use chatbots primarily, and that's just decision trees. It asks you, is your flight canceled? Have you been waiting for more than 3 hours? It just goes down a decision tree to help eliminate customer service needs and leave high-end things for actual phone calls. And then financial services, fraud detection. For instance, if you're generally not making $6,000 purchases in Mexico, but suddenly one day your card's making 16 purchases in Mexico to the tune of $6,000, it's going to trigger an alert so that your bank calls you and says, "Are these you?" And you're able to quickly say yes or no. Hopefully you're having fun in Mexico, but probably not, and you need to say no. And then the last other kind of fun thing that I just thought of, as I was playing, and this will both date me and people can make fun of me, playing Skyrim, an old version of it on my Xbox 360. Those are based in the same way on traditional AI. You're a character in it, but you approach other characters in it and you can talk to them. They have a script. Based on the script, it's going to generate an outcome. So based on the various kind of scripting to it, it creates your gameplay. From everything from games to how you get your news and wake up in the morning, there are all kinds of traditional AI pieces built into your daily life.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's a good comprehensive list. And I see a question about ethics in the comments. Don't worry, we are going to get to that topic. So I think we will answer that. But if we don't, revisit it towards the end because we've got it on the agenda. So before we sort of jump into actual use cases and how we can or should or are using generative AI tools in e-discovery, I wanted to ask sort of one more high-level overview question about large language models. So Sarah mentioned that in her sort of explanation of AI. Bobby, can you give us a little bit more of an explanation as to what large language models are? Because we certainly hear about those a lot.
Sure. And I'm going to tie it into specifically the legal profession and why they're so appealing to us. First, large language models, they're a type of generative AI that are trained on these massive data sets of text, usually. Think of them as large algorithms that are really good with words, text, language. So they fit in hand what we do as lawyers, right? They write well. They're good at communicating. This allows, kind of LLMs to generate text that's both grammatically correct and semantically appealing. And that's why, those are some of the same characteristics that lawyers have, right? In terms of their writing abilities. And, so I think it kind of fits hand in hand with what we do as lawyers, and we often find ourselves writing. Some of the examples include, ChatGPT, which we all know of, Google Bard, Meta Llama, which was kind of the first free, most robust, or one of the most robust freeware LLMs out there. There's other LLMs, Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, AWS Titan. So Amazon just released their version, their flavor back in April, I believe, that sits on top of Bedrock. So they have a lot of flavors out there. In terms of, just to kind of point this out early, because it's something that we all need to think about in the legal profession. In terms of architecture, what we're really seeing is two different types of LLMs being built for the legal use case, legal space. The first one is kind of the more prominent version, which is from an infrastructure standpoint. The majority of the large language models today are what we call containerized, or not containerized, I should say. So they're not self-contained, right? So as a result of that, many of these tools take the extracted text from uploaded documents and transmit that extracted text to one of the larger analytical engines, such as OpenAI via an API or otherwise. That onwards transfer of information to such non-containerized engines could present a risk to the confidential nature of business documents, could present a risk from an ethics standpoint in terms of confidentiality, waiver of privilege, and all of that. In contrast, there's the containerized version, right? Which, you basically have a foundational model sitting in a private network or a cloud that's not transmitting bits and pieces of data beyond the private cloud or network from which it sits, right? So from a data security standpoint, that is, obviously a preferred workflow for many organizations, as data will be self-contained within the network, or at least your cloud instance, and you're not relying necessarily on the large public LLMs that everybody's hitting, that everybody's sharing, and no pieces of your data or your query are going kind of outside of your network demarcation zone. So I think that's what we're seeing in terms of containerized versus non-containerized. If you don't mind, I can just hit the question really quick that was kind of input a few minutes ago.
I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So if we can just put a pin on that, and we'll come back to it, because we've got a whole ethics section I think we want to get to. Sarah looks like she has something to say.
Yeah, I did add to what Bobby was saying. I think that, there's obviously, for security and privacy purposes, which are, at the forefront of our industry, containerized solutions are the way to go for generative AI. Now, I just want to point out, you have to kind of, level your expectations also, because what is a large language model? It is about, the more data that a generative AI has access to, the better it is at providing you with answers. So when you have a containerized LLM, what happens is it starts off with a base model of information, and you can actually, it's kind of interesting, you can use, there are companies that create kind of base models for LLMs of information, like maybe it's medical, maybe it's legal, maybe it's something else, or construction, and you can, you give it that base model, and then whatever you feed it in terms of information is what it learns from that point on. But I mean, you're not going to be getting, ChatGPT has access to 1 billion or more users around the world, and all of their information, they're going to know more. It's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, how do we, Bobby, you touched on this a little bit, but how do we really manage these privacy concerns, right? As lawyers who are trying to use these in the most effective and efficient ways for, on behalf of our clients, or on behalf of our firms or our companies, how do we manage these privacy concerns? Because they're real, as you guys have just talked about, they're real.
They're definitely real, and I think that we're going to get clarity over the next year to 18 months. You're going to start seeing state bar opinions. California already has one that's in the works in terms of guidance when it comes to generative AI. Interestingly enough, in their bar opinion, they kind of mentioned the fact that data being transmitted to a third party is a no-no, right? So the example I provided earlier, where data is going to OpenAI, technically could be a violation of what California is about to publish, just to give you an example. So I think things are going to come into more clarity in the next year to 18 months. Remember, in our profession, when email came out, there was this struggle. Can you use email for the legal practice and whatnot, right? And that quickly went away, right? So for right now, there's definitely risks. I think things are going to start to be fleshed out in the near term when you start seeing bar opinions and agencies chiming in, helping lawyers understand what they should be doing, what they can't be doing. In terms of what a lawyer can do and what legal professionals can do, I would urge asking the right questions, understanding what your technology is doing. Where is your data going? Are bits and pieces of it going, even if it's fragments? Are bits and pieces of it going to a third party based on your input queries? How long is that data being retained? Are you getting a rep and warrant if you're in direct privity of contract with the provider? Are you getting a rep and warrant that's telling you that they're going to be deleting it after a certain amount of time? And if you're not in privity of contract with the provider, let's say you're engaging a vendor and that vendor is engaging OpenAI, then that becomes also a concern because you don't have a direct contractual relationship with OpenAI. Or whatever the LLM provider is. So understanding those basics, I think that's critical. And then it comes up, then it's up to the organization, right? What kind of risk appetite do they have? What type of data is being ingested? There's other factors to be considered there. Generally, I mean, my clients tend to be the large, Fortune 100 companies, and they're very, very hesitant about putting their data, even if it's going to be transmitted for a very short time and being deleted in 10 seconds or a few minutes. They're very hesitant about letting their confidential information go at this stage because we don't have that clarity from, bar opinions and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I want to talk a little bit about how we are using it in the e-discovery space. So I guess my question would be, how are we using it, or how can we be using AI in the e-discovery space? And then maybe a follow-up or a sub-question of that would be, what advice do you guys have for attorneys or e-discovery professionals who aren't using it yet to get their feet wet and to start using it? Because it can be really overwhelming. We're hearing there's just so many options and there's only more and more options every day. So what advice do you have for people who are like, I want to try it, but where do I start? Jonathan, I'll start with you on this question.
I'm going to hit the new to AI piece, the second question first, and then I'll let folks who are more e-discovery based hit e-discovery workflows. But some of this touches data no matter how you're touching it. So e-discovery and data or contracts are very similar. But if you're new to AI, like many people are, start by understanding the basics. So ask around, build your foundational understanding of generative AI and those concepts and terms, just like we started the conversation here today. You don't have to become an expert to grasp most of these concepts. At least that's what I'm hoping in my case. I'm no expert by any means, but I hope to grasp as much as I can around me. Identify pain points. So don't just make stuff with AI to make it. As Bobby kind of alluded to earlier with privacy, all of your tech processes, especially those that touch any of this AI or generative AI, will have to be mapped out, and then how those processes touch the globe. All of that's got to be considered. So the more you build with AI, the more complex your mapping and considerations and privacy concerns have to be. So don't just make stuff with AI to make it. Pinpoint challenges where AI makes a real big difference. So if you're thinking about this, talk to your stakeholders and figure out those real big pain points. That could be like document review, contract analysis, research tasks, data analysis, crunching numbers, showing that in visualizations. And then explore legal tech solutions. So if you're new to this, get out there and talk to vendors, research platforms and providers, tools that incorporate AI, or start asking yourself, if you're a big enough team and you've got some resources, like how could I start building something that I'm dreaming about? Utilize free trials and demos to see how AI might work in your legal use case context. So again, those pain points, see what other folks have. Folks often say start small, but I like to say start impactful. Begin with a manageable but impactful project, something like AI-powered document review or legal agreement summarization, and then evaluate the impact and then build confidence gradually. Collaboration across the business. You want to collaborate with all of your colleagues to see like what their needs are with AI, not just one specific use case. How could you then show that off to the rest of the company? You also want to attend workshops, webinars, and conferences like today to stay updated on anything you can in legal tech. Keep talking about ethical considerations. We're going to get into that more, but stay informed about all of these kinds of changes across various jurisdictions, states, countries, and then ensure compliance to maintain trust and ethics within your company and the legal field. Make sure you're doing an ROI assessment. I'm almost done, sorry. I know I've got like a list here. Make sure that you're getting a high return on your value for AI solutions. Again, don't just build stuff to build it. If you're going to put time into it, make sure that the time is worth the squeeze. And then continuously seek feedback from your partners in the business. Are you getting from the things that we're looking to build what you need from it? So that's where I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. So how are we using it?
Can I pick that?
Yeah, please.
Yes. So we have to, at BlueStar, we've been using AI, traditional AI, for over a decade. So this is something that we should just kind of, keep calm. This is something that we've been using for a lot. TAR is AI, right? You can be using AI in so many wonderful different ways. We talk a lot about review because that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about how can we use ChatGPT and to find our key documents in our review platforms. But, we're actually AI developers at BlueStar, and we take a step back. And, as Jonathan said, it's like, what problems are we trying to solve? And there's some real, problems that have been facing the legal industry that we've just decided cannot be solved. And AI can solve a lot of these problems. So like handwriting, for instance, we have a product that can actually OCR handwriting with the help of AI because it mimics how the actual vision. You can utilize AI to not just be in review, but how about we're talking about AI, the thing where it does is it looks at a lot of data in a way that a human, it would take too long to do. So it draws, conclusions from a large amount of data very quickly. So if we're trying to investigate something, if we're trying to find those key documents, maybe we need to apply that early on, left side of the EDRM, before we even grab data. We're using AI to look into Microsoft's activity logs to identify aberrant behavior while it's happening, to perform investigations, to pinpoint days where, employees, there's aberrant behavior, whether it be from a, employee theft kind of perspective, or from, other types of activity like harassment and discrimination and that kind of thing. So I think that the use cases are amazing. There's so many things you can do. It does not have to be AI or no AI. There are solutions for every different type of matter. There's a multitude of different ways it can be used. I suggest that people I don't suggest a lot of research, to be honest with you. Do your research, find a trusted provider where that's their job. Your job is generally to practice law. Find people that this is what they do all day, every day. They're dedicating their lives to that endeavor. And if you trust them, get the download, that's let them be your AI and summarize the documents for you,
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And there's some really great questions that are popping up in the chat. And a lot of people, I can tell, are focused on the minimizing risks portion of this, which is, I think, really important. So I'm just gonna jump over there, and I'm gonna start. We're just gonna move there because this was we were gonna go there anyways. But I want to start talking about this because these points are actually ones that we had in our outline. So I'm gonna start with the first question up there, which talks a little bit about functionality, so we can sort of round that out and then move to some of the ethical and responsible use conversations. So the question is, what happens? So if you're employing a vendor and using AI to assist in, however you're using it, whether it's reviewing documents or whatever, what happens to the metadata and whatever the AI tool has grabbed from that client data once the case is over? And how do you sort of ensure confidentiality? And Bobby, maybe I'll go to you on this because I think you touched on it a little bit with vendor agreements and what does it say and what
Yeah.
what is the contractual obligation between the parties. But I think that there's probably some follow up here on that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said contractual agreements and what your expectation is with your providers. One of the aspects that you should look into, we talked about where's the data going? Well, how long is the data retained, including user prompts and other information that's being maintained? And how long do you want it to be maintained as an organization, right? Balancing the risk with obviously the benefit of having the historical usage information. So this is all something that it depends use case by use case. I'm doing a lot of work in drafting policy documents now for clients in terms of generative AI use and how they should be updating their engagement letters with their providers and their outside counsel. And that is definitely one of the aspects, one of the considerations that I put in a document, that this is an item that we need to discuss. And unfortunately, there's no wrong or right answer. I think it depends on the risk appetite, the use case, and what you're using it for, right? I've seen clients who want to delete that history at a very short basis within a week. Other use cases, we've kind of put in a policy where it stays around for 6 months. Kind of depends on the use case, but it's definitely something that organizations should be thinking about.
Well, and are these conversations that, this is a softball question because the answer is yes. Are these conversations you should be having with your clients as well about expectations of data and AI use and all of that with your clients, not just with the vendors? And
I think
yes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you have to have your house in order. I mean, you're saying as a law firm, as a lawyer?
Yeah, as a law firm, if you're engaging a vendor for AI purposes or you're using in-house technology, those are conversations you should be having with your client as well, right? Like, this is how we may use AI and this is what's going to happen to your data. And
absolutely, you should be having those discussions. As a law firm, as a lawyer, you should have your house in order before you have those discussions. So understand what's happening with the data, which models are being used, what's the source of the models, how were they trained, how long is your client's data going to be retained? Is it going to be retained after the project? Is it going to be used for further tweaking of the model? These are all questions that you need to ask. So don't go to your client just saying, hey, I want to use AI, especially when it comes to generative AI, where things are so much in flux. Have the basics down, understand what you're trying to do. But absolutely, I think it makes sense at this stage to have those conversations, right? And that answer may be different. Maybe 10 years from now, it is completely accepted and everybody knows and everybody's using it. And things could change. This is a very dynamic process. At this stage, if you're going to use it, I think it is best practice to kind of have those discussions, particularly if you're using your client's data.
Yeah. I just want to add to what Bobby said there. It really has a lot to do with how the technology is implemented as well. This technology, AI, these APIs are available to anybody. Anybody can create AI solutions. So how is the technology that you're considering using? How has it been implemented? If it is in some kind of public or non-containerized environment, like Bobby alluded to earlier, then you don't have a say. And it should be known, like, if it's free, you're paying for it one way or another, right? So, never use anything that is, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is, and you're probably paying with your privacy and the privacy of your client's data. There was a question here about de-identification. That's another thing that can be talked about in the contract or with your vendor. You can de-identify that data so that maybe that can fit your purposes if it fits your cost model. It depends on what type of data it is.
I'd just add, sorry, Alicia, just because I kind of sit in the middle of these two worlds between engineering and legal. They're my wheelhouse, but also a responsibility to deal with this. Often I get the help, and this is going back to the question of, like, how do you get your feet wet? Maybe you're not an expert in this. I work with my legal teams who are experts in this, in any company I've ever worked in, and then also the engineering security teams. So between the two of those, I get a lot of my engineering security teams. What questions do we need asked? Here are the checklists. And if your company doesn't have that, obviously start there. And then as you work with your attorneys on all of the items that have been gathered from the EngSec teams, then you can start to develop those contracts that protect everyone and safeguard the company.
Yeah, thank you guys. So another question, and this was a topic that we wanted to explore, so I'm glad that someone asked this question, is we've all heard about the Mata versus Avianca matter in the Southern District of New York, where there were two attorneys that representing Mata who submitted a brief that cited 6 cases that they had gotten from ChatGPT that were fictional cases. Everything about them was made up. And there's also a state court case in Colorado that had a very similar fact pattern where a brief was submitted with made up citations and cases. And so, obviously, I don't need to go into all the details of what happened there, but the court called them out on it. The other party called them out on it. And ultimately, there was a motion for sanctions. And sanctions were issued in the Southern District of New York case. So, the question is, maybe we can talk a little bit about what how the AI was used irresponsibly in those cases and sort of how we got to the point, like why did we get to the point that we got to in those cases? There were things that were done wrong. There was some bad faith conduct on top of just the AI use in the Avianca matter. But maybe we can talk a little bit about how they did not use it responsibly. And then how do we use it responsibly? Because I think one of the big takeaways here is that AI is not a standalone tool, right? Like it's supposed to be used with human interaction and supervision. So I don't know who wants to start on this particular question. Sarah, maybe I'll go to you on this first, but how do we use it responsibly and how is that not done here?
Well, at BlueStar, we call it HI, human intelligence. So, we've been doing this for 20 years. We understand the technology behind it. And, we have to kind of help our clients understand the risks and benefits that the AI presents. And when it comes to, things like how they can use it responsibly. So when we're coding, let's give an example of just why something like that happened. Why was that data inaccurate? These are large language model. They're predicting what the next word is going to be that would fit best to the question that you have asked. And when they don't have an answer for you, these hallucinations occur. Okay. So let me give you an example. Outside of legal, if you were to ask a AI to code, write a program for you, like in code, everyone says, "Oh, it's great for that." That code won't work. Because it's going to take a million of difference of references, right or wrong. In fact, the references that they could be looking at could be generated by other AI that are hallucinating, right? So a great way to use it is to kind of use it to kind of take what you have and make it better. So we want to be, let's enhance what we do, right? So for instance, if you're looking at, I have contract reviewers that are looking at 1 million documents, and all the documents are in Japanese and I don't speak Japanese, we're using it to kind of do a QC on a contract review to summarize the types of documents that are be considering irrelevant or see if they contain particular concepts. So we're using it to leverage human work. And I think that's a really good way to use it these days, not to replace it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bobby, talking a little bit about this Southern District of New York case, what were the mistakes that they made in using the tool, and how do we not do that if we're going to be using it, if we're going to be using it for drafting, for example? And Sarah was talking about doc review, which I think is a primary use case that people are, that's probably the one way we actually are using it pretty effectively or learning how to. But if we're going to try to use it for other more complicated or substantive things, how do we not have what happened to them happen to the rest of us?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Here are some, I think, practice tips that would help. First question, understand the technology. Second question, understand what the risks are. Third, what are the limitations and built-in, and I'm going to kind of get into examples, but third, what are the limitations and built-in guardrails? Mm-hmm. Once you understand those 3 items, after that, it becomes clear, or I think it comes into focus, what kind of procedure you need to establish to verify the output based on the underlying risks, the limitations and guardrails we just talked about, right? So in this particular circumstance, understand the technology. ChatGPT, capable of hallucinations. There are no guardrails in place that would verify the underlying content, including the case citations. Risks, well, you're presenting this to the court. There's tremendous risks, sanctions, disbarment, very high risk situation. So from there, once you do that, I think it becomes clear, well, if I'm getting case citations, I better verify the heck out of them and make sure that they actually exist in Westlaw or LexisNexis database. Now I'm going to give you another example, right? Same situation, but let's say the lawyer is using a tool with guardrails in place. They are using, and I don't want to advertise other people's tools, but they're using a case text or Harvey, that do legal research, that have guardrails in place, that cross-check databases to make sure any case citations that are coming back are actual case citations.
Right.
In that situation, because of those built-in guardrails, there's probably less need to verify the output. Now, you still need to verify to make sure there's additional case law out there, whether your case law has been overruled, there's additional cases, but there's less scrutiny I think you have to put on existing case citations because the technology already has those built-in safeguards. So I think that's the process that you need to employ, understanding that this is a technology, when we're talking about generative AI, it's very different in a lot of respects than other technologies that we are used to because it generates content, and it could generate content that's inaccurate or false. So understand the technology, understand the risks, understand the limitations and guardrails in the tool that you're using. And ChatGPT, there are no guardrails. And from there, establish your procedures to verify, vet the underlying content.
Well, and ChatGPT, or this case, the Southern District of New York case, which I've read the opinion several times. I actually just taught my law students on Monday this particular case, so I've read it a bunch of times. And one of the issues in that particular case was the lawyer said, after this all sort of came to light, the lawyer said that he thought that it was a search tool, a search engine. And so he was using it like he would use Google or like he would use Westlaw to search for cases that hit on particular issues, as opposed to using it for its purpose, which is, to predict the next word in the sentence, or to, that's how generative AI works. And so someone made a comment here, which I think is, I would agree with, is that you have to know what the tool is before, how it works and what it's supposed to do before you sort of actually start to use it. And another thing that came up in that case is talks about sort of the prompt engineering that we keep hearing so much about, is that when they asked ChatGPT the questions that generated the content that they then got and used in the briefs, the questions were very, very vague, and they're in the order. The questions that they asked the tool are in the order, and they were, show me some cases, show me some more. Those were the actual questions that they used to ask of ChatGPT. And of course, that's not specific enough, right? So it all goes into what you're talking about, Bobby, about how you have to know how it works and understand how you're supposed to interact with the tool in order to get the desired results.
I think that goes to just the duty of technological competence. So this isn't new with generative AI.
Right.
I mean, you could have spent 5 minutes doing research and understand that, yes, these generative AI tools without any guardrails in place are capable of generating fictitious false content.
Right.
So I think it's a duty of competence issue as well.
Yeah. I mean, so now, we've been talking about these really cool tools and how we interact with them and how we can use them. What happens to the human lawyers here? What are lawyer roles going away as some of these tools are increasing in efficiency and effectiveness, or are they just changing? What is it going to look like for us as lawyers as we continue to move forward in this evolution?
I'll start here. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
Sorry, Bobby.
Go on,
because I'm often implementing technology that folks are assuming as a legal technologist that I'm trying to replace their jobs. It's like trying to say as you get on a plane that we're going to replace the pilot with autopilot. There's no human, it's just going to autopilot. Folks, aren't comfortable with it, and it's not a great decision. there's several reasons for that. It's because lawyers make complex decisions. Machines are very tricky to train to make complex decisions. So if we're thinking about the complexity of legal decision making, just from a technological perspective, that's really hard to build into AI. So we could use AI for co-pilots, but never for primary pilots in that way. So I think that that's like, we're not going to be replacing anybody in that way. And then it's also hard to train ethical and moral considerations. Whose ethics and morals anyway? That's why attorneys are really good, because they understand nuance, they understand cases, they understand context around things that machines just don't quite get. They understand large language, but not specific context that an attorney will. And client relationships, of course. Machines don't have any kind of concept of client relationship. So there's this dynamic nature of the law that means that the machine can never replace the interfacer with that. And so as much as we love to make the world streamlined for attorneys, to get them out of the boring drudgery of, say, contract review or looking at document review, trying to find anomalies and data patterns, if we can get them out of doing those kinds of tasks, it frees them up to be in the rooms with people doing the real work that I think ultimately all attorneys went to school to want to do. I didn't go to law school, but I assume that you didn't want to go to do contract reviews, because I do a lot of contract review in the last 10 years, and it can be pretty boring. And so if we can help you not do those boring tasks, that seems to be the goal, so that you can do the real hard-hitting stuff that will never be replaceable, not in the AI context. At least that's my opinion.
I agree with Jonathan, and the point of technology has always been to make things easier, and to, it's basically, these are the tools in your toolbox. I believe that the job of an attorney, and certainly from a discovery and review perspective, is much harder today than it has ever been, because of the volume, the sheer quantity of data to review, because of electronic discovery. So if we can use AI to kind of help make that job a little bit easier, that is what we should be doing.
So Bobby, when TAR got introduced, when we started really using TAR in earnest, and it became much more mainstream, and more people were implementing it. I mean, there's no question that TAR creates efficiencies in workflows, and especially in large scale document reviews. But where we were saving some time and money there, it seems like then we also had to start arguing over how to use TAR, right? So then parties started to argue about using TAR and validation metrics, and how are you going to implement it, and who's going to be doing it, and how are you going to check it? Do you see that happening with generative AI tools? That where we create efficiencies, we then create additional work, maybe in another way, whether it's having those arguments or some other way?
Yeah, I mean, I can say, I'm going to answer this in two ways. I hope not. I hope we as a profession can learn from the lessons that we endured during TAR. And, 15 years since TAR was introduced, at least since I first started using it, and it hasn't caught on as much as I would have liked, simply because there's what's called the TAR tax. So that's when you want to use TAR, but your adversary makes it, from a procedure standpoint, very difficult for you to use it. It wants to know all kinds of information that you never used to provide in the old world, but now they're asking for to be involved in crafting your document review process and looking at non-responsive documents and asking for an unprecedented level of transparency that isn't required by the federal rules or case law. Because of that, I think a lot of clients and a lot of lawyers are hesitant to use TAR because, okay, you get some cost savings from a document review perspective, but if you're going to have to go to motion practice and you're going to have to spend 6 months negotiating a TAR protocol, is it really worth it from an efficiency standpoint? So I'm hoping we learn the lessons from from the TAR world, and understand that there's some level of transparency that might be needed, but have a focused effort. It should be really focused on what you think you're not getting, and it shouldn't be early on in the process having a long, cumbersome process of 6 months negotiating a process by which you can use generative AI. So I am very concerned that we will fall down the same trap that we did with TAR because of the adversarial nature of the industry that we're in. And a lot of times, unfortunately, when you're dealing with certain litigation, you might have counsel that may not have the greatest case on the merits. So they try to make procedure the sideshow. And they want to spend a lot of time making it as painful as possible for litigants to litigate a particular case. So I'm skeptical. I mean, I'm hoping that it doesn't go down the path of TAR, but just given, our adversarial nature of things, I am kind of concerned about the generative AI tax that might be incurred by litigants.
Yeah, and something I was thinking about when you were just responding, Bobby, was, with TAR, well, just with technology in general, there has been sort of a gap in adoption based on whether it's the size of a matter or the size of a law firm or the size of a practice or the size of a company. And you see smaller firms and matters sort of behind the curve even on using hosting platforms for data. I mean, we still see PDF productions, right? So when we already have that sort of gap that exists in the adoption of technology, is AI and generative AI and the real fast ramping up of that technology, is that going to create a bigger gap? And if so, how do we navigate that?
I could start
Please.
With that question. I think I don't think it's going to create a bigger gap. I actually think it's going to be a tool because of the understandable nature of how do you use it. There's an easy interface. You kind of understand what the results are that are coming back. It's more intuitive. I think there's going to be more adoption, and I really think that it's going to level the playing field in some respects when it comes to smaller firms, giving smaller firms that otherwise lack manual resources, kind of a force multiplier, and a method to perform tasks that once took an army of lawyers to complete with a fraction of the resources and a fraction of cost. So I think it is realistic for small firms to use it, and I think we'll see more of an adoption on the small firm side just because of the intuitive nature and how it does act as a force multiplier.
I want to be a little bit of the devil's advocate on that one. I 100% agree that generative AI for small firms is going to be really will democratize the legal field more than we've ever seen before, because it's really going to enable them to kind of go up against the big firms with less resources. However, today, I don't think we're there. I mean, we may not get there for a few years, and it's really a few reasons. One is that it's cost prohibitive at this time. The way that a lot of these models are charged are token based, and challenge you to explain that in 2 minutes. But anyways, it's very expensive, and if you perhaps prompt the AI incorrectly, in some instances, you could have just incurred a lot of costs, meaning you ask it a question and you're looking at 100,000 documents, you just rang up $35,000 bill for the wrong question. And so ouch, for a smaller firm, what we see, our clients, we'd love them to be using AI. We're finding adoption for smaller firms of traditional AI is really lagging because of the upfront costs. There is no matter how much you can talk about the benefits, the efficiencies, all this good stuff, it is, well, okay, I'll pay, X for this, but I can pay, maybe 50% more for actual humans to do it. And I trust that, and I know what they're going to do, and I'm familiar with that, and no one's going to put the TAR tax on me when I go to court. So I think that there will be a period where we, especially until the costs come down, and that is being worked out now, right? Why is it high? GPUs, supply chain, demand. That will come down. It'll become commoditized. We'll have that accessibility from a pricing perspective. The legal industry is traditionally late adopters most of the time, especially smaller firms that have more at risk. So we're going to see that. I suggest that when you have people in your, that stand behind you, when you, have people that can give you the good advice on what the right tools to use are, take that advice, give it a shot. And if you're going to use AI, make sure that the vendor of the AI product is prepared to stand behind you as well. And I mean, like in court, sign affidavits, explain in a very easy to explain manner what this AI does to a judge or to a jury, so that you are can get over that tar tax more easily.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So I want to move to the ethics discussion here, because we're nearing the end of it. I want to talk about ethics, and then I have just a couple of questions, sort of future forward-looking questions for the panel. But who is responsible for making sure that AI is being developed and implemented ethically? And what does that even mean? What does ethical mean in the context of AI as a product, as a tool, and as users? Jonathan, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it leads right from where we left a second ago. So where Bobby and Sarah both had a slightly disagreeing opinion, I think that there's a common thread that loops them back together, and it's that as an ethical community, we all have a responsibility for the small firms or the small companies from the bigger firms. We should be pushing back on developers, just like Sarah said, to hold them accountable, as she said in the I'll quote her because I think it's a great idea, to court. It's like let's sign up together in that way to make sure that developers are really in it to win it with us on that. Making sure that all the regulatory bodies and kind of concerns that Bobby has mentioned along the way are built into those vendors and those processes that we're all signing up for. And that as kind of a larger society, we get together and start having these tougher conversations about, like, what does ethics mean? You're not going to build in one kind of ethics. You're not going to choose a Kantian or a specific style of German ethics to build into your AI machines. It's going to be community ethics that we all sort of sit down and decide together. And those will center around, principles that we're all kind of familiar with, like fairness and transparency, accountability, privacy, safety, non-discrimination, justice and equity to it. So I think that there are a lot of ways that from large companies to small, we can all start pushing developers to develop in the right way. And to Sarah's point about costs, equitability to these kinds of things. So maybe really large corporations will pay more for enterprise accounts for something and get unlimited access to it, where smaller mom and pop style firms and companies will have a more reasonable price model. That way, everybody has access to this good stuff, because we want to level the playing field, because ultimately, from a tech perspective, I want my attorneys interfacing with other attorneys at organizations of all sizes to be able to do their jobs easier and to get everybody home to their families a couple hours earlier. Everybody's working long hours in economies where it's do more with what's available. I want them to be able to do more with what tech is available, but safely. And that's going to involve us all getting together at big round tables, deciding what's right together so that we all get home to our families a couple hours earlier.
Thank you. Bobby, do you have any
Also,
thoughts on ethical use of it?
I do.
From a legal and or lawyer perspective of how we use it ethically.
Yeah, so I think we're still going to touch on regulation, so I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah, you can go into that now, because we've only got like 7 minutes left, so just have at it.
Okay, so I'm going to make a couple points. First, something that's near and dear to my heart as a minority. I think lawyers and legal practitioners, we need to ensure we're using AI defensibly, responsibly, and in an ethical manner, right? Most AI systems are trained on the inputs defined by humans. And as humans, we are flawed, unfortunately, right? So the explicit, the implicit biases that are prevalent in our culture, in our world, also contaminate our AI models, including these large data sets for LLMs. This could be, just to give you a simple example, it could be bias in legal research, right? Where we have LLMs generating results that are biased towards a certain viewpoint, or results that suffer from the same racial and gender inequalities. So I think it's something really that we should understand and be cognizant of. This is going to be a challenge that's real, and we're going to continue to struggle with. From a regulation standpoint, I do think it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge. We have the EU AI Act, which is very far along and should be adopted by the end of the year. It's going to establish the first comprehensive, large-scale regulatory scheme for AI. It's going to encompass broad mandates for governing and overseeing AI, as well as a tiered-based risk approach. So if you're using it for certain cases are prohibited under the EU AI Act, and other ones, if you're a tier 3 or tier 4, you're higher risk. So you need to do some additional vetting and verification checks before you implement it, and then at various points in time. I think instead of there's kind of a hodgepodge. What I said earlier. I just read an article last week where initial indications suggest that Southeast Asian nations may be adopting a more business-friendly approach, a less burdensome approach when it comes to guidelines, right? So they're not necessarily going to have any mandates, at least early on. That's the indication, but they'll have some guideposts and some guidelines. In the U.S., unfortunately, think of it as we're sitting here in 2016 on the privacy side, because that's what 2023 is on the AI side, where you have a patchwork of state laws and regulations that are going to continue to expand, and in the absence of federal regulation, which I don't think we're going to see anytime soon, it's going to make it very, very challenging on what organizations are supposed to do. Are they supposed to follow the mandates in the EU AI Act, as they did with GDPR, and make that the lowest common denominator? And the EU AI Act does set some requirements as it relates to bias and training and ethical use, or do they need to do something different? So it's going to be an area that we're going to struggle with, because we're going to have no clear guidance and kind of this patchwork of laws that we might have to deal with.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's very helpful, and it's important to think about sort of where we are in the legislative and regulatory sort of atmosphere and where we're ultimately going to go. I have one final two-part question for each of you. I'd like each of you to answer. You each have a minute. I'm going to start with you, Sarah. Where do you see us in the e-discovery world, or in the legal world, with AI in 5 or 10 years? And this is from the chat comments here, is what's a use of generative AI in legal that you've seen that makes you really excited?
Going to be coming in the next 5 years, and what I'm actually really excited about, and this is something that we're working on, is actually twofold. Is one, getting that pricing down so that a private containerized large language model can be utilized in the review space. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's one. The second one I'm really excited about is, we're talking about, we're we have so much discovery, so much data. I really see generative AI being used to not find our kind of answers to our questions before we even get to the point of collection. So that's what I think is possible. I've seen it in action. You can use generative AI to kind of, especially when we're talking about corporate litigation, to analyze, your environment, the data in your tenant, to say, here's what's happening, here's where you should look, here's the days in question for particular, malfeasance. That is coming, and I'm super excited about that, because then we'll have way less discovery, hopefully, and a really easy way to find what's relevant. Because that's what we're trying to do.
Sarah.
Needle and haystack, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. Bobby, I'll come to you next, and then Jonathan, we'll end with you.
Yeah. So I don't think we're 5 years out. I think that we're going to start seeing this next year, and I think e-discovery is going to look very, very different than it does today in as little as 18 months. Mm-hmm. This is very different than TAR, because you have every hardware manufacturer and software manufacturer out there trying to generate solutions for this, right? I just, talked to a provider yesterday who provides you 6 foundational models on a hard drive that you can plug in, and many of them are open source, like Facebook, Meta's Llama. So it's going to be a game changer. I think it's going to be a game changer in the short term. We're going to solve that GPU problem and the resource problem very shortly, because there's so many resources and companies kind of getting into this space. I do think it's going to be a game changer for e-discovery. I don't think it's going to make our older tools obsolete. I think we're still going to need statistical models to help us identify relevant, responsive documents, if that's the use case we're using it for. I think they're just going to be kind of tied in together. So you'll have a generative AI tool that works well with the statistical analysis tool. I think in terms of use case, it is capable of analyzing large data sets and answering complex questions and generating a conversational response, right? So I said earlier, very intuitive to use. Lawyers are going to find it very intuitive, and people in general find it very intuitive to use. And if you compare that with today's workflows, which are very cumbersome, right? You take this hunt and peck approach to identifying documents via search terms, and then you build classification models on top of that. This is really a tool designed to help you identify and analyze large data sets quickly. And to the extent you're using statistical models to identify relevant content or make other kind of classifications, it is going to be a tool that jumpstarts your workflow and makes things and basically allows you to get things done faster and more efficiently.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. And Jonathan.
And I think in the next couple of years, somewhere between Sarah and Bobby's estimation, we'll see a lot of the ironing out of these kinks in regulation and governing bodies making decisions on these, because frankly, everybody's looking for faster deal and contract times with less risks. So we're all wanting to get to that same kind of goal. And I think we'll see a lot of synergies from a lot of folks that maybe we wouldn't have expected. Everybody's going to be trying to get to that. So I'm hoping to see fair just access to all of these tools and fair pricing models, like Sarah mentioned, so that everybody has access to do this. That way, all of our business partners, large and small, are easy to work with, and the folks enjoy their jobs. And where do I see this kind of working today already? Summarization of agreements and documents. So nobody wants to spend their time looking through something that can be summarized quite easily with relatively low risk in multiple languages. We know some things that generative AI and traditional AI paired together excel at. So low-hanging fruit, easy wins. That's kind of one of them for me. So very excited about the future, though.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was super informative. I don't know if Deirdre's going to pop back in or not, but if anybody wants to connect with us, please do so on LinkedIn. You can find us all there, send us messages. Feel free to follow up with any other questions that you might have that maybe you didn't want to ask or you didn't get answered during the course of the panel.
I want to personally thank each and every one of you. You are remarkable. I really enjoyed this. A little bit over an hour. We could have gone on forever, but unfortunately we have time restraints. And if anybody came in late or you're missing this, this will be available to you on YouTube, also on BlueStar's website, and we also will email you with a link so you can watch it when you have time. I want to thank you guys again so much for being a part of this panel and sharing your knowledge. I want to thank all of our viewers. I hope you got what you needed. And if you didn't, like Alicia said, please follow up with these panelists on LinkedIn. And everybody have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.